Welcome and Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Kitanu B'Mitzvotav V'Tzivanu La'asok B'Divrei Torah.
Amen.
Thank you. And of course, we are now on to the Parsha of vaYera. And we are just getting into the section that deals with the destruction of the cities of the five cities of Sodom and Gomorrah and Admah, Tzvoim, and Zoar. Those five cities. They are basically the cities that we mentioned, those kings earlier on, with with that battle that Abraham fought against the four kings against the five kings, and those are the cities that are getting involved here. And as I was going over this parsha myself, I was thinking of the parallels that are showing up. Again, if you look at this as literature, it just explodes with literary nuances and things like that. So right now, of course, we have Abraham having just shown hospitality to the strangers, the angels, and they have left him. And now Abraham is standing in the presence of God, and God has said to his retinue, "Should I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do?" And there's a beautiful, beautiful passage which talks about how, because Abraham is going to teach his descendants the way of truth and justice and compassion, etc. And of course, God doesn't hide from Abraham. And so he tells Abraham how the sin of these five cities has risen before him to such an extent that he's going to destroy these cities. And we have this famous, famous passage of Abraham confronting God, of course, in a deeply, deeply humble kind of way. But we'll go on. So he's actually already started. And right here, he says he has already appealed to God, right? And let me just go back and read this beautiful, beautiful, memorable passage. It says, Chalila lacha, this is Abraham addressing God and saying, "Far be it from you, me'asot kadavar hazeh, to do such a thing, lahamit tzadik im rasha, to destroy the righteous along with the wicked. V'hayak tzadik rasha." And the basis of the argument means that a righteous person is exactly the same as a wicked person. This idea of perhaps a very fundamental binary, that there's such a thing, even though there's gray areas, and there's no doubt about it, but what we would define as a tzaddik as someone who is bending the scales of merit, whereas a wicked person is bending the scales of wickedness. And that's how it works itself out. But to basically emphasize that there's accountability and that there is judgment of the kind of life we live. To look at our lives and say, how do we stand before the designer, the creator of the universe? That it gives us such significance as individuals, but that God should not treat the righteous the way the way the wicked deserve. And he repeats, Chalila lach, far be it from you. And this beautiful, beautiful line, Hashofet kol haaretz, shall the judge of the entire earth, lo ya'aseh mishpat, not do justice. God, if you're in the position of being the judge of the world, are you not responsible to act justly? And punishing the righteous along with the wicked is injustice. And this is beautiful. It says, Vayomer Hashem. So God responds to Abraham and says, Im imtza vistom hamishim tzadikim. If I find in Sodom 50 righteous people, betoch ha'ir, in the city. Now this is important because one can misunderstand what this text is really saying. And it's only, I mentioned this in my previous, a year ago when we did this, that the reason why that Sodom is a figure of speech. It was the main city of the 5 cities. And God is actually referring to all the 5 cities. And if you divide 50 by 5, of course, you get 10. So God is saying to Abraham, if I find 10 righteous individuals in the cities, in each city, I will spare them. V'nasati, and here's the proof, right? It says, V'nasati l'chol hamakom ba'avoram. I shall, have mercy. I shall overlook the entire place on their account. So all those cities would be spared, even though the population, the vast majority of the population were wicked. 10 righteous people in each city would allow God's mercy would extend to the point where the cities would all be spared. And what this is saying, though, there's a takeaway here that regardless of how other people are behaving, we have a responsibility. The amount of strength and spiritual power we possess to influence what is happening is in our hands. And it puts a tremendous power on each individual. And of course, along with that power goes a tremendous responsibility to do everything one can to act in a righteous way. And of course, the Torah and the study of Torah tries to put us in that position to act in a righteous way. So consider the takeaways that come from all of this. So we now have each one of those 5 cities will be spared because there are 10 people to be found in each, righteous people to be found in each one of those cities. Vayan Avraham Vayomar. And Abraham speaks up and says, responds and says, Hinena, behold, look, he says, Alti ledaber el Adonai. I have begun to speak to my Lord, Va'anochi afar va'efan, that though I am but dust and ashes. So Abraham recognizes, and you can see in the direct speech here of Abraham that the Torah is sharing with us, Abraham's deepest humility and the recognition he has of who he is in the presence of God. So beautiful explanation here, Rashi. Vanochi afar va'efer, but I am but dust and ashes. The ukvar hayiti ra'ui liyot afar. Look at how Rashi is pulling this out, and he says, based, of course, on these midrashic interpretations that Rashi is so familiar with. And he says, already in the past, I was fit to become dust. Why? In what previous situation might he have been worthy of becoming but dust? Al Yadei, by means of Hamalachim, the kings. In other words, he's recognizing that when he confronted those 4 kings, right, his small band could have become dust under their power. And he's recognizing God's grace to him and protection. And how about ashes for Efer al Yadei Nimrod? So this is midrash. It's not stated explicitly in our Torah text, in our written Torah text, but there's a tradition that, and it's implied by the term ur kazdim, which ur has to do with like a fire, a furnace, right? That King Nimrod, who was an idolater, tried to destroy Abraham when he realized that Abraham believed in one transcendent God, creator, and he threw him into a fiery furnace, and he would have, of course, become ashes in that. Lulei rachamecha, were it not, this is putting words in Abraham's mouth, were it not for your mercies, asher amdu li, which stood for me, which stood on my behalf, protected me. And we could say rachamecha could also have to do, it comes from the word rechem, which means womb. And I think it has to do with this deep love that that God has for every creature, that it's, that we are God's creatures, and that kind, as if we came from the womb of the divine, and the love that God has for all of us. And here in the case of Abraham. So, going on. Ulai, perhaps, Yachsorun Chamishim Hatzadikim Chamisha. Perhaps those 50 righteous people will lack 5. Hatashchit b'chamisha et kol ha'ir. Will you destroy on account of 5? Look at it. He's bargaining, right? Will you slaughter, destroy because of 5 the entire city? And when he says here singular, he means the 5 cities. On account of 5, vaYomer, and God says to him, Lo ashchit, I will not destroy im imtsasham, if I am to find there, were I to find there, arba'im chamisha, 45, by 45 people. So, Rashi, hatashchit b'chamisha, will you destroy all 5 cities on account of 1 missing? So in other words, dividing 45 by 5, we get 9. We now have 9 righteous individuals in each city. V'halo ein tet l'chol prach. Rashi says explicitly, we now are talking about 9 in each city. V'ata tzadiko shel olam, and you are the ultimate righteous one in the world. Titzdaref imahim, you will join, you will count with them. So that will be the 10th. You who are also tzaddik, and you're present everywhere. So now we've got still 10 righteous ones. Next. So.
Well,
yes.
So with God counting as a 10th,
yes.
Does that have anything to do with why sometimes some people count the Torah in a minyan?
That's such a good, that question actually comes up. Yeah, there's I don't know if it's in Brachot, in Tractate Brachot, but that issue does actually come up. And the question that the Talmud asks is God a human being? Is God a man? In other words, there's a push against that notion of counting God in the minyan. In this particular case, it just says righteous ones, right? So, but the whole basis of minyan has to do with the definition of Edah, of the word Edah, which means community. And because in the book of Numbers, there's a reference to the 10 spies as an Edah hara hazot, this wicked Edah. That's how we get 10 men counting as a community, as an Edah. So in this particular context, I don't believe that's the case. Now, based on the answer of the Gemara, which I recollect, has something to do with the fact that when you have 10 people or 9 people all clumped together, it's very difficult to tell whether or not you have 9 or 10 people. And likewise, if these people are all spread out, it's also maybe a little more difficult to actually determine exactly how many people are there in an eye shot. And that's the basis on which they call. So they don't count the Sefer Torah, at least according to this Gemara. One doesn't count a Sefer Torah as the 10th person, or God being because we're praying to God. So God doesn't count in the minyan here. But here we're talking about a context of righteousness and righteous presence. So I would tend to say, not compellingly, right, that isn't, it's a great question and a totally legitimate one. I think it would be on many people's minds, but I think based at least on the information that I have, I would tend to move away from it and want to hold on to how the Gemara responds. Despite the question we might have in terms of that response. Now, having said that, there's a lot of material, and my knowledge of Torah is not exactly encyclopedic. And there may be something or some source that suggests that the Sefer Torah can count, and gives its reasons as to why. But at least based on the information I have right now at my disposal, I would have to say no, that's not the reason. But here we are simply talking about righteousness.
But why do some congregations count the Torah as the 10th?
Because they are not aware of what I just shared with you. Is it okay? Okay, so I'll tell you where again, there's no place, at least that I'm aware of, that counts the Sefer Torah as a human being. Okay? The Sefer Torah doesn't pray. The Sefer Torah isn't engaged in what is humanly the 9 other people are engaged in. But where there is wiggle room, and perhaps where the confusion comes in, is that if you have a minor, in other words, somebody who's less than 13, a boy who's less than 13 and is not a bar mitzvah, if this person, I'll just give you the traditional way it's said, is if this boy is capable of reading a Torah, in other words, and understanding what he's reading. In other words, you can give him a chumash, not a Sefer Torah, but a chumash. And if you give him a chumash and he can read that chumash and make sense of it, he understands basically what he's reading, he can count. And I'm not even sure if it can even go beyond, whether they can stretch beneath 12 years old. But we're talking about a level of understanding now, so that the act of prayer is done in an intelligent, intentional kind of way. So the fact that we're talking about a chumash, in the hands of a minor, maybe, I realize, again, I'm not trying to be compelling here, but maybe as to why this all came about. But that's actually where the Lord stands on this, that I'm aware of. The basic understanding. So you do have some wiggle room, but basically you're still talking about another human being. And that's why a baby can't count towards the minyan. But I seem to recollect that as long as this minor understands, has a basic understanding when they read the English of the Chumash, right, or the Hebrew of the Chumash, and I don't remember any language issue being raised in this particular issue. And I'm sure, if we were to read a response on this, they would dig deep into all the permutations and combinations, as to whether or not the minor has to be able to read it in Hebrew or not. But my guess is, this is going to be a distinction between a liberal and a not a liberal, and a very conservative way of looking at things. But I would say that if at least on a practical level, if I were seeking a minyan and I had a minor who could read a Bible and understand basically what they were reading about, I wouldn't hesitate to count them towards the minyan. And it only goes for one. You can't just keep, going all the way down. Let me continue a little bit. So I don't know if I finished up the entire sentence, but God says, Lo ashchit im sham arba'im v'chamisha, right? I won't destroy these cities if I find 45. Let's see. Yeah. On to the next one. Vayosef od ledaber elav. And again he continued to speak to him. Vayomar. So Abraham says to him, Ulai yimtza'un sham arba'im. Perhaps you will find 40 there. Now notice how you went from 50 to 45, and now we're down to 40. And we're not going to go to 35. We're going to go from 40 to 30 to 20 to 10. And we'll see why, okay? So maybe you'll find 40. And notice, by the way, how Abraham is putting it. He doesn't say, well, perhaps another 5 will be missing. He simply says, if you'll find 40. And he says, God says to him, Vayomer lo e'eseh, I will not do it, ba'avur ha'arba'im, on account of 40. Well, we need to know what God won't do. And this is what Rashi is going to tell us, right? Let's perhaps you'll find, or there will be found there 40. This is like a key line which means 4 of the cities will now escape. So in other words, now you've got 10 righteous people, but because you're talking about 40 and you divide it by uh, by 4, then you'd get 10 in each city. If you divided it by 5, you'd have 8 in each city, and that would not be enough. So it's really, really important that there be 10 righteous ones there. So and Rashi just simply tells us how it starts to work out, right? Because the next time Abraham is going to speak to him, v'chein lamed, and likewise 30. Yatzilu shlosha mehem. In that case, 3 of the cities would be able to escape this destruction. Or kaf, or likewise he goes to 20. Yatzilu shnayim mehem. In that case, 2 of the cities would be rescued, or Yud, or 10. And of course, that's the last place Abraham states, the last number, 10, Yatzulu echad mehem. One of them will be spared. So Rashi is explaining to us how the numbers work. So it starts off with understanding we're talking about 5 cities, and the way Abraham is looking at this is that he wants to see if he can find 10 in every city. And if he can't, then it just gets less and less, and fewer cities would be rescued. But at least something, right, that they wouldn't be utterly destroyed. Let's go to one more verse here. Vayomer, and Abraham knows what he's doing, right? You don't bargain with God, but he's not bargaining for himself. And in fact, I just want to bring to your attention that when God tells him to go and offer up Isaac, Abraham doesn't bargain. There's no bargaining here. Abraham bargains for others, not himself. Vayomer al na yichar l'Adonai v'ado beira. He says, please let the Lord not be angry, please, and I will speak so that I can speak. Do not feel that I am being impudent and arrogant. It's possible you'll only find, or there will be found there 30. God says, won't do it if I find that. Sham Shloshim, if I find 30 there. And we will stop here today, and I'll put in the marking. And we'll continue with God's help tomorrow with this.
You said that he wouldn't bargain for himself
Right.
but it's not just for himself.
I know.
It's for Sarah. It's for the line. It's for everything. It's
Yes,
for us. I mean, really.
Okay, but does he benefit here particularly? And he doesn't.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
It's true. Others would benefit as well were he to bargain. But I think, and this is, I think, perhaps key, is that Abraham considers these people, Sarah and Isaac, to be himself.
Okay. And I can see that in that time period also as
Right.
possessions-ish also.
Well, I also think it's something for us to think about nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
Understand that when we marry, when we bear a child, when we have children, they are part of who we are. We would, in a very, sincere and profound kind of way. So I'm going to stop the recording with this, and please God, as I said, we'll meet tomorrow.